is the importance of mentors and mentorship. And, you know, it's something that, you know, I didn't really pick up formally in my life until probably 5 or 6 years ago. And I always believe very much that my journey would have been a lot smoother along the way, you know, had it happened to me 20 years ago plus. I read a quote when I was preparing for this today from you that said, "You need to listen to the greats to become great." Hey guys, it's Matt Haycox here, and welcome to another episode of the Matt Haycox Show, where today is actually the first one being filmed in my cabin on the Sea Squirter. So a very exciting moment for me. Not recorded for a while, so looking forward to getting back at it. And today I have got a great guest with me, Mica Paris. Mica is a singer, a TV presenter, an actress. She released her first album, a debut album called So Good in 1988. And since then, she's released 7 more albums. That first album, which she was just 19, it was a platinum selling album. She's also an MBE. In my research, I've also seen the word she's not averse to comically deploying swear words. So she's going to fit in just fine on the show. She's had a roller coaster life, some very low moments, some very high moments. So looking forward to hearing it all, picking her brains. And thanks a lot for being here, Mica.
Oh, thanks for having me, honey. It's great. It's great to be on your show.
How long will it be till you comically deploy a swear word?
No, you know, it's quite you say that, but I don't actually swear when I'm working. When I'm doing interviews, that's not when I use expletives, you know. I don't. I do that in my normal life. Like when I'm hanging out with my friends, I swear like a trooper. But the minute I'm working, somehow professionalism sort of kicks in. I always think of my grandmother and my grandfather listening, even though they're no longer with us. It's like an autopilot thing, you know. I always think that if I'm on telly or something, I don't want to mess it up because they'll get upset. And it's still there.
But I don't know how it is we do that. It's almost like that automatic internal function. You know, like when you feel sick, but you're in a public place and your body automatically it protects you, doesn't it? But as soon as you're in private, it blurts out. It's like
you're out. You wait for that cab ride. That cab ride is done. And you wait to shut the door, run in the house, run up the stairs, boom, and it's all out.
But I mean, it doesn't matter how you speak in front of your friends. The second you're at tea with your parents, it's like again, your mind's on autopilot.
It's mental. I don't know. It's auto. Yeah, it's great.
Well, listen, I obviously get it.
It's respect. You know, it's respect. I really feel that a lot of the times when you kind of are too you know, you use too many swear words, people forget about what you're talking about. It can be quite distracting.
Well, listen, I gave obviously I gave a little bit of an intro to you, but there's so much more to tell. I wondered if you could maybe start at the beginning of your journey, and I guess, you know, bring us up to speed. I mean, I know you were a singer as a kid, and you know, sang in your grandparents' church. I think. Tell us how it all began, and what brings us up to today.
Well, what happened was, you know, my mum and dad were real 60s kids, like having a really good time, put it that way. And then when they had the kids, you know, the girls were first. We were like the Brady Bunch. So it was like 3 girls were first, and then there was a 7-year gap. I'm the last girl. Then there was 7 years before the boys came. And my mum and dad were having fun, and so they left us with my grandparents. It's quite a normal thing in Caribbean families. You'll find grandparents sort of chip in and take care of the kids. It's quite a normal thing. So my grandparents are ministers and pastors, so we spent most of our time going to church. I mean, it was pretty much 6-7 days a week. My grandfather had prayer meetings. They had choir practice, Bible studies. I mean, the house was the 2 things growing up in my grandparents' house was classical music being played 24/7, because their kids are, you know, they're all trained pianists. So every day there was recitals. Do you know what I mean? Every day it was Scott Joplin, it was Mozart, and then it would be gospel in between that. So the house was just filled with music all the time. Music, food, and Jesus. That's the only way I could describe it. But it was good. I mean, look at them. They're all, you know, they've all got their bachelors in music and all that stuff. So they're you know, they're very, you know, everyone in my family, I always tell people, it's quite interesting that my whole family, my sister has a PhD. They're all like well educated, which is nice. And I'm the mad one. Yeah.
And tell me, I mean, when you were singing at church, I mean, did you ever? I mean, did you know you wanted that for a career? I mean, did you see yourself back then? Ultimately being a performer.
It kind of started when I was, I think I was about 5, and my grandmother tells us, and I was walking around the house and I was singing Rupert the Bear, that show that used to come. That was my favorite show, and my grandmother started getting excited, and she started ringing everyone, saying, Misha's got an amazing voice. And I was only 5, but she could hear it, and then by the time I got to like 8, I think it was the first time she had me learn one of the songs that I used to, while my friends were playing all the time, I was obsessed with listening to American gospel records. I would be, back then it was all vinyl, and if you've ever been to a Jamaican house, the living room is like a museum. You're not really allowed to go in there. It's like everything is precious. So I used to wait till everyone was out. I used to tiptoe in, put the needle on the record, and I'd be listening to those gospel records from the States that my aunt used to import. And by the time I got to about, like 8, 9, I could do every riff, every ad-lib that the Americans were doing on that record. Every day I was listening and learning my craft. I was just obsessed. I wanted to sing like them. And then my grandmother and my grandfather put me to sing in the church, and it was maybe like 100 people, and then people went absolutely nuts. And I noticed, like a kid when they got a trick, and they just keep doing the same trick because that you're getting a reaction. So what I noticed, every time I held the notes really long, everyone would get in the spirit. And I was like, yeah, I like this. This is good. And then my grandmother started getting all these phone calls about this little girl with the big voice of yours, your daughter, granddaughter, bring her to our church. And then my grandmother was like my agent. She literally took me all over the country, every Pentecostal church in Britain, and there are loads of them. I would be singing at them all the way up until I was 11, when I sang at Wempier for the first time. And I was, oh dear, sorry about that. And sorry, have I lost him?
No, I'm still here. Yeah,
I've lost you, James. I need you. Sorry about this. Sorry.
I can still see you.
I can't see you.
I can see James.
There he is. Hey, you're back. Sorry about that. So basically, I became this little prodigy in the church community around the UK, the little girl with the big voice. That's what happened. And then I got discovered at 17, singing in the church by this fantastic man called Viv Broughton. And he was editor of the Voice newspaper, and he financed my demos. And I got signed to Island Records when I was 18. And you know what happened? The rest was history. Put out the first single, which was My One Temptation, and it went absolutely nuts globally. So after that, for 5 years straight, I was touring every country. I lived in America as well for a while because it was doing so well, the record, that I had to live there to tour.
Where in America? Where in America?
Oh, I lived in New York. No, my base was New York. My flat was in New York. Right opposite, looking at, I don't know if you know New York well, the Hudson. So I was living right there. Yeah, the Hudson River, and there's also a monument called the Hudson, and I was right there. So it was a beautiful apartment, and I stayed there for 2 years, touring with people like Ashford and Simpson and Simply Red, and then I headlined my own shows, and I was on everything, David Letterman, all of those shows. I was just everywhere. So it was a big, big shift from being this little South London kid to being this global sort of, superstar. It was intense for a teenager. It was big.
I was going to say, actually, when we were talking about the gospel singing, I used to live in the States for a while, back in like 2009 to 2013, 14, and I was in Vegas, and they had quite a few places where they do the gospel breakfast brunch on a Sunday. Yeah. And it was, even if you're not religious or you know nothing about it, it's just it's an environment that you can't help but be excited and drawn into, isn't it? There's just something very much about it.
It's a feeling, it's a great feeling, and you don't have to be a believer. For me, I've always told people my favorite part of growing up in church was the music bit. The minute he started to come on and do his preaching, I kind of switched off. It was all about the music for me. But yeah, and also I got a roasting for leaving the church. But, you know, when I signed to Island Records, the whole church community, which is massive, like, you know, their conferences are in Wembley, if you imagine. So it's a big organization. I was the star of that. So when I then left to become a secular artist, they weren't very happy about it. You're going to go to the pit of hell was the line.
Surely they're supposed to learn to turn the other cheek.
No, they didn't. Not with me, darling. I got roasted. It didn't stop me, you know, just kept going.
Tell me, I mean, a big part of what I talk about, you know, in general on my podcast and with my audience is the importance of mentors and mentorship. And, you know, it's something that, you know, I didn't really pick up formally in my life until probably 5 or 6 years ago. And I always believe very much that my journey would have been a lot smoother along the way, you know, had it happened to me 20 years ago plus. I read a quote when I was preparing for this today from you that said, "You need to listen to the greats to become great." So obviously it brought me right back to mentorship. I mean, was that something said? Well, I guess you've said it recently, but was that something that was more part in your early career, or now you're obviously established and successful yourself? Do you still feel that, you know, you've got mentors or you've got, you know, greats that you look up to and take advice from?
Yeah, I take advice from. My thing is, when I was growing up, the reason why I said that statement was because that's what I did. People ask me, you know, why, you know, how do I sing the way that I sing? Is because, like I told you earlier, when I was younger, and while my friends were out playing on the street, I was in the house listening over and over to great vocalists. And that's what I mean. I studied great singers. So if you really want something, you study people who are already successful at it, and then it becomes yours. I mean, even Amy was the same. Who's, you know, Amy and I were friends, and she was the same. She was listening to Sarah Vaughan every day. That's why she and I got on, because she did what I did. You know, she was a little kid listening to the greats, the Billie Holidays, that, you know, every day while the kids are out on their scooters having a laugh, she was in the house listening to Sarah Vaughan. And, you know, you were the odd kid. Everyone thought you were crazy, but that's what you do. If you're passionate about something, you want to listen to people who have already acquired the success in that thing. And you then become great yourself. It's just about putting the time in. You know, when you're passionate about something, you haven't got time for anything else. You know, my whole thing has always been the same. Obviously, being in church, it was a great place to hone a talent, because you get to sing every single day. But what's wonderful about the church environment is that you're selfless. My gift is not mine. You know, that's what I'm taught. I'm taught that everything I do is to touch people's lives. That's it. It's not self-glorification, which is what most people are doing, what they're doing for. It's not about that. We're here for each other. That's the beautiful thing you get from, you know, being brought up in the church. And I think it's stuck with me, you know, that thing there. It's really about passion. Really, it's about that.
Well, and like you say, you know, you said a minute ago, you know, it's about putting in the time and you know, the time, the passion. I don't think there's no success story that I can think of, whether it's in music or sport or business or anything, where, you know, when you hear that person talk about the journey to success, it doesn't involve, you know, thousands and thousands of hours as a kid, as a young adult, you know, whether it's practicing the craft themselves or listening to others or watching or just being completely absorbed. You know, any of the greats in any field, you know, I've got that common trait with them.
Sure, exactly right. And you see that the thing that's changed probably over the last 50 years, I think, is that there's been a decline of people caring about their craft. And that goes for anything, not just music, anything. I came from, you know, a time where artists were all about the craft. It was about bettering yourself and being really good at what you did to inspire others. That's always got to be the intent. The problem we've got now, the intention now, is more about self-glorification. That's what's wrong. So what you're finding is when you're listening to music now, or modern music especially, you're not feeling anything. And this is because the intention is not there for service to humanity. It's as simple as that. So, and that goes for anything. It's not just music. It goes for anything that you do. If your intention is not to raise the vibration of the planet, there's no point.
Why would you say that has changed? I mean, do you think it's a more modern day culture of of instant gratification and social media and those kind of things?
Yeah. For me, it was even before social media. It's about the quick turnaround. I mean, this really sort of happened at the end of the 80s. There was a whole thing where everybody wanted everything very fast. The whole thing about, building up your craft, because, everything has to be built from the ground up, step by step. Suddenly, whether it was technology that did it, suddenly everything was faster to achieve. You could do everything really quick. But doing everything quick also means it's not going to be quality, is it? It's going to be, it hasn't been, it's like cooking, you've got to take your time. You've got to marinate the food. You've got to take your time and let it sit for a bit. And when you cook it, it's on fire because you took time to marinate it. You know what I mean? It's the same thing with your craft. I'm a better singer now than I've ever been in the whole 33-year career that I've had, believe it or not. And, that's because of years of doing this thing. It's like wine, it gets better with time, as long as you put the time in working,
You've had 33 years of marination.
Exactly. And a lot, a lot of mistakes, come on, we're human beings, it's like, it's the pain, it's the up and the down and the getting up again when you've been knocked sideways how many times. The pain of betrayal, suffering, sadness, loss, gain, all of that goes into that vocal. That vocal isn't going to be the same vocal that I had when I was 19. It's going to be a whole different vocal now.
Well, that's I guess a perfect segue into what I was about to talk about next, which was that for all the highs of your career, there's been some very low moments as well, and a real roller coaster ride. I mean, there's a couple that I was particularly going to talk on. Maybe you've got some others you'd like to share with us as well. I mean, obviously the one that's I guess closest to my heart from a financial background and someone who has suffered from it myself as well is your bankruptcy.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know much surrounding it other than the fact that you were made bankrupt.
You know what? It's like I always say to people, this happened in the 90s. So basically, after I had a really long run, it was 15 years into my career when basically I had to declare bankruptcy. And there's no need to go into why. It's just when you start off in the business and as a teenager, you're not taught about the financial part of how it works. You're just given all this money and, you run off and come on, you give a kid a loaded gun, what's going to happen? You don't have any experience of money. I come from wonderful working class people who worked super hard to buy their first house, coming from the Windrush generation. So, the whole thing it was overnight. So if you've never had sort of money management skills or not taught it, of course you're going to mess it all up over a period of 15 years. And that's exactly what happened. I just put stuff in the hands of people who probably weren't the best people to advise. And, it all went pear-shaped because it wasn't managed right. And because I don't have a business head, especially as a teenager, who does? And that's really all it was. And then this is why I say to people, bankruptcy just means most of the time that you made too much money and you didn't take care of it. You know what I mean? So, as I said, you turn your scars into stars. And I love that because I think that it makes you these things. A lot of people are so obsessed with how do I look? And, I've got to look a certain way. We get so caught up in that. I have to be looking a certain way and represent this person to be super successful and everything I do is fabulous. No, it's called being a human being. I mean, you look at people like Richard Branson, 11 times bankrupt, for crying out loud. He's one of many. You just keep going. And for me, when you mention it, it feels like at the time, I remember when it first happened, I was like, oh, that's pretty sad, isn't it? And it wasn't even affecting me. What affected me? It was people's reactions. I was like, they act like you just like killed someone. And it was like,
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, really, around how you felt the stigma to that was to you at the time. I mean, I was made bankrupt in 2008, like September 2008. Mine was
a terrible time. Yeah.
So I was at the kind of very beginning of that when I was young. I was 27, 28 at the time, and there wasn't a bigger black mark, a bigger stigma in business. I mean, I guess you and I have come from the different careers insofar as with business, you probably argue that the bankruptcy is more of a black mark, more directly related than in, let's say, a media type career. But all the people surrounded by me at the time, professionals, experienced people, were very much, you'll never work again. Your career, your career's over. You're finished. And I always get asked about how did I deal with it, and how what were my great tips for coming back. And I never had an exciting answer to give, because my answer was always very much, I had no choice. I could sit at home.
This is the thing, you see. This is why I said it's all about people's opinions of you, isn't it? And here we go again. I mean, when I got into this music business, I had everybody telling me this was a very bad decision. I was forcing my manager from the gospel community who was managing me. I was forcing him to get me a deal when I was 17. He was against it. My family were against it. My friends were against it. They all said, you're never going to make it. You're never going to get anywhere. I'm really used to that. The thing for me is, the more you tell me I can't do something, the more I will do it. And you really have to be this person. You don't allow people's opinions to affect you. You just don't. You get up, you brush yourself off and keep moving. That's my motto, because there is no finality in this life. Life is always about change. It's always about, and if you can always adapt, and hopefully before the change, adapt before, then you're ahead of the game. So you don't allow these silly little things. Who cares? I always say to people, when you go to a graveyard, right? You don't see yachts and houses and planes. You don't see any of that. You just see the tombstone. That's it. Done. You're not taking any of this with you. It's just stuff. And the beautiful thing for me being in art, it's so important, that mentality, because none of those things makes your art any better. You're not tuning into that. It's harder for people who don't have a creative outlet to be affected by things like bankruptcy or losing a company or losing whatever. It's much harder for those people who don't have a creative outlet. It's much harder. So I understand your pain, because it's, where is your outlet? For me, the healing for me is always writing a song, being in the studio. I forget about all my stuff then, because it's not about the stuff. It's about touching people's lives. And that is so much more important than a company or whatever. Who cares? Just build another one.
Do you find it harder to have that mentality when some of your low points are in the public eye, or have you kind of trained yourself to be ignore that?
I love that question. I love what you've just said, because it's not about training. I tell you what happened when as I said, I've always had to say to people, okay, that's your opinion, that's cool, but I'm going to do it anyway. That's always been my motto from the beginning. I think it's when you are very young and you deal with abandonment. I'd always felt as a kid, my parents abandoned me when I went to live with my grandparents, which gave me a fighting spirit to show them from when I was a kid that you shouldn't have left me here. You should, because I was going to school and everyone at school had their mums and dads, and I had my grandparents. I always felt like I was half a person. But that gave me a fight. And that's why I say to people, your scars, you turn them into stars, because it's that stuff that makes people interesting. When you've been battered, hurt, rejected, whatever, it makes you a stronger person, or you become a victim. It's either, you have a choice. But for me, it was always, I'll show you. And I've been doing that ever since. And then you get to a point where you're like, I'm not going to show you. I'm just doing this because I actually love it. I've got nothing to prove. It's all in the pudding. Whatever I create, whether I'm writing my new book, whether I'm writing a record, whether I'm presenting a TV, everything I do is coming from a place of pure intent of touching you, inspiring you. That's all I'm about. None of this stuff matters to me. And it is hard to have that existence, because you don't get a lot of support when you feel that or think that way. But as I said, when you're passionate about something, all these other things, they're just frivolous. They're just really, really, I swear, I can't even explain it to you. It means absolute zilch. I look at people and I think, wow, for you, that's the most important thing, having a name or I remember the first time I got my first review. It was my first showcase at at the Ronnie Scott's. It was my very first showcase, and all the press were there. I just got signed, and it was just before I was about to release my One Temptation, my first single. I just turned 18, and imagine you're there. Every newspaper person is sat in the audience. And, Ronnie Scott's is tiny, so they're all looking at you. And I'm like, I thought, I'm not going to look at them. I'm just going to look at the ceiling while I'm singing. And I just started singing, and I gave it my best shot. I was 18. I gave everything I had. And the next day I opened up and it was the Times. I opened up the Times newspaper, and it said, the voice is good, but no stage presence. She can't really see her getting anywhere. Good voice, though. I was absolutely devastated. And I was 18, and I remember thinking, that's it. I will never read another review again. Fast forward, 30 years later, I'm playing the Royal Albert Hall, and I get a review from the Times saying, Mica Paris, the most incredible singer this country's ever produced, and she's the queen of UK soul. So then you just go, you know what? You see what I'm saying? Just don't look at it. People read stuff today, and they forget about it tomorrow. No one cares. But you're there, sat there going, do you know what I mean? And I've got a lot of showbiz friends, and I've actually told them the same thing, because you can, it's not easy living your life in the public. It's very, very tough. It's like I describe it to walking in Tesco's at 6 p.m. with no clothes on. I mean, it's just it's horrible, But you just learn that it's not about people's opinions that keeps you going. Remember, it's what you do. You love what you do so much that you can't even hear the naysayers. It's not even there.
So, I mean, obviously, when we're talking, the clear passion that you have for your music is obviously bouncing across the Wi-Fi to me. But you've had a varied career with acting and presenting and stuff. I mean, do you feel as passionately about that kind of stuff as you do the singing, or is it just?
I do. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of the things I've had to do, and I say this to when I speak to kids, sometimes I do stuff with schools. I go in and do talks for the kids. I love doing stuff like that because they're so little. They've only just started. They have no idea what's about to happen to them. And, it's like this, as I say, even if sometimes you have a passion for something, sometimes you have to do other things to get to that passion. You don't say no to other things that aren't the passion that you have, because some of these other jobs that I've done, not necessarily wanted to do them some of the time. Number one, terrified. I remember when I got approached by Radio 2 in 2003, I just lost, my record deal with Ireland after 7 years. I was pretty deflated, and I just thought, oh, my career's finished now. And everyone told me my career was finished because I just lost my biggest record deal that I had for 7 years. And I remember I was in my flat sitting down thinking, it's a bit depressing, isn't it? What am I going to do now? I haven't got a job. And then suddenly I got a phone call, and it was Dionne Warwick was ill, and she had a Radio 2 show, and the head of Radio 2 called up and said, Mica, would you mind stepping in because Dionne Warwick is ill and presenting this show? And I turned, I remember I said to my sister, Radio 2, that's really posh. I can't go on that. There's no way I'm going to be able to speak. I was like, furthermore, I don't do radio. What are you talking about? And I was really scared. And she said, just do it. So I went down and I did it. And I ended up getting my own show for 5 years on Radio 2. And, it was called Soul Solutions. And I was getting 1 million people a week over 5 years. And that's kind of how it is for me. I get approached. I try different things. It might not be the music, but I ended up doing a different type of music. I was able to interview people like Mary J. Blige, Lou Rawls, all of the greats, Bobby Womack, and all these heroes of mine. I was actually talking to all my heroes, and it was great. And it's a slight diversion, right? But then it prepares me for my next journey when I do my music, because I'm getting all of that information. So that's what I'm saying. Sometimes you might do things that aren't exactly what you're thinking you're supposed to do in terms of what you've chosen to do, but it will assist and aid what you do and enrich what you're doing. You see, so it's all good. Just don't be afraid. The whole line to people is always try everything. I'll try anything once. except I won't just Strictly Come Dancing again. I did that and I was absolutely dreadful at that. I was shocking. My dad rang up and I was second out. I was that bad because people just assume as a black person, you always have rhythm, and I'm a great singer. Yes, but don't ask me to dance. I come from the 80s. People did the dancing for me.
what about dancing on ice? Will we see you on the skate?
Oh gosh, it's never going to happen. I'm shocking, honestly. My dad rang up and he said, you got a great voice, Mish, but you really can't dance. I mean, it's pretty shocking. It was really awful.
I mean, you've obviously been fantastic at dealing with adverse situations and putting positive spins and coming back to be stronger afterwards each time. I mean, obviously, one of the I guess events in your background which is probably going to be harder than anything to come back from is the death of your brother. I think. I mean, can we talk a little bit about that? I guess maybe
we can. We can, and it's quite interesting because a lot of people don't know that Chris Eubank is my cousin as well, and we just lost my cousin, his son.
Of course, I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, and it's just a shock for us because it's so weird. He looks, his son Sebastian is the image of my little brother. People can't see the relation, they can't see the familiarity in my face and Chris's. But when you look at our children and the brothers,
it's the hair.
But if you look at his kids and look at our family, you can see it. It's all there. And Sebastian is the image of my little brother. So it was almost like it was a rewind. It was weird. It was like we've been blessing Chris. He's really struggling with this one. It's a big one. It's really hard when that happens, when they're young. And, my brother was 22 and he was such a beautiful guy and so gorgeous. And it was a shock. I literally had to stop my mum from, jumping into the grave. She was ready to go with him. It was tough. And I found that when I ended up working with Trident, because I took on, working with Trident with the police and everything. And I started meeting all of the mothers who had similar situations where they lost their sons to gun crime and knife crime and all of that. And I was visiting the mothers. It really helped me get through the pain of my brother. And this is what I tell people all the time. When you go through a really bad time of any sort, go and help someone else who's also gone through it. And you'll find it really helps you heal. And all those mothers that I was speaking to, they were so grateful that they could share their pain with my pain. And equally, I was grateful that we were all together, helping each other, building each other up through this, because it's not easy. I mean, it took me 5 years to literally get back to normal after that. It was so hard. It was such a blow. And his kids are beautiful now. They're doing great. And it's just nice that, they're growing so nice. But it was nothing more to tell you. It was just really horrific.
When you say obviously it takes you 5 years to get back to normal, I mean, even though you get back to normal, do you think something like that you ever fully recover from, or do you find that's probably got its place in your music and everything you do nowadays?
Yeah, because it's not the first death that I've had. I've lost quite a lot of close people in my life over the years, and what you learn about death is a real game changer. Death is a thing where everyone's terrified of it. You can see how COVID is an example of how people are so fearful of death, because we're not taught how to deal with death growing up. We're not taught that. And so whenever it happens, it's always like a complete, everyone breaks down and, they don't know what to do. And what the multiple deaths I've had growing up, because I stopped a lot of people I lost from a very young age. I was faced with death at a young age. You learn that it makes you appreciate every moment being here. You don't take it for granted because you just don't know how long you've got. That's what death does to me. It makes me go, hang on a minute, I better get moving, because you just don't know. So that's when I say it's a game changer. It's not, obviously you realize that some of us are just not going to be here for very long. It's not part of that plan. It wasn't part of Jason's plan to be here past 22. But his children are his legacy, and they're doing great, and he's done his bit here. And that's how we've got to see it. I mean, that's how I see it. You know, all of us are leaving at different times, and we have to, you know, I remember my uncle, when I lost my uncle, he died very young as well. And he was like 28. And bless him, he died of cancer. And I was about 25 at the time. And I was visiting him in the hospice before he died. And I never forget what he told me. And I was about 25 then. I remember he said to me, you know, Mish, you're lucky. You've traveled the world and you've seen different countries. And I'm never going to be able to see. And, you know, he was 28. And I never forget that. And then he died 2 days after. You know, things like that, they make you understand how precious our time is here, and we mustn't take it for granted. I mean, we've got to look after each other, you know, we've got to not take people for granted, because how many times have you seen people just pop off and they had a massive fight before the person died, and they can't come back to that and make it right, you know what I mean? So it's not worth it. So that's what death does to me. It makes me not waste a minute while I'm here, you know?
100%. Well, so again, and in bringing us back to today in terms of not wasting minutes, what are you up to right now? Tell us about a couple of recent projects, or what we've got to look forward to in the life of Mica.
It's beautiful. There's a lot of great things happening. I'm doing my 8th album right now, album number 8. There's loads of TVs you'll see over the autumn. I've just done loads of TVs that I'll be everywhere. And I'm doing a tour of the UK right now, which is fabulous. And, you know, I'm really just glad to be here. I feel like I'm celebrating my career at the moment. The thing for me, which is really nice, without talking about everything that I'm doing, because it's all there on Instagram, you'll see it. But
we want to hear about you. It's all good.
No, but, you know, like for me, it's like, I'm just so grateful that people are still interested in what I'm doing. And, you know, like my last album did really well. It went to #1 in the UK R&B charts, which was a really amazing thing to do after 11 years absence, you know. And when I hear people coming up and saying that song really got me through the lockdown and stuff, I mean, that's it. That's what you do it for, nothing else. And so I just hope, you know, my music continues to do that to people, you know. I'm just nosy. And you'll always see me doing multiple things because I'm just a nosy person, and I just want to see if I can do different things, experience myself in different things. That's what an artist is, explorer.
Well, if you're still performing when I'm back in England in September, I'll have to come and check out one of the shows.
You, honey, anytime you want to come, just make the call. We'll get you tickets. We'll sort you out. Honestly, done.
Well, listen, Mica, it's been fantastic having you on the show. Thank you very, very much. You know, I mean, so many good things to take away, but I think, obviously, for me, the biggest thing that shines through is the importance of passion, and you know, obviously, what a massive part it's played in your life, and even, I guess, even if you don't ultimately achieve this, if one doesn't ultimately achieve the success they wanted, you can't help but have a great and beneficial life if passion's at the root of it. So thank you so much.
And also the other thing, I've just remember what I said about the intention. It's got to be that you want to inspire others, whatever it is that you do. That's the #1 rule. Then life is great.
Well, listen, thanks a lot for being here, guys. Watching or listening to this, I hope you've enjoyed listening and watching as much as I've enjoyed talking. As always, press like down below. If you don't subscribe, make sure you subscribe. And if you're watching, you can listen on iTunes or Spotify. And if you're listening on iTunes and Spotify, make sure you check out the video versions. I'm the Matt Haycox. That's TheMattHaycox on pretty much all the channels. I look forward to seeing you again next time. Mica, thanks a lot for being here.
Thanks, darling. Thank you so much.